Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about police officers in Gujarat publicly flogging a group of men from the Muslim community. We also talk about the three scientists who won the Nobel Prize in physics this year. But first, we talk about a tragic story that has emerged out of the West African country of Gambia. Yesterday, the World Health Organization or WHO reported that 66 children had died in Gambia and that these deaths were linked to 4 syrups that were manufactured by an Indian pharmaceutical company. To talk about this story, we are joined by Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, who reports on health for the paper. Anonna, could you begin by talking about what the WHO has said about the cause of these children dying?
So, they issued an alert for 4 Indian manufactured syrups yesterday. And what they've said is, there were 66 deaths of acute kidney injury, and these are potentially linked to the consumption of one of these 4 syrups, which are meant for allergic, cold, cough, and fever. So that's what we know so far from the WHO side.
And can you tell us a bit more about these 4 syrups and the kind of ingredients they contained?
So all the 4 syrups are manufactured by a Haryana-based company, and these syrups contain various ingredients, including, anti-allergic medication, a cough syrup. It has paracetamol for fever. So these are the ingredients in all of the 4 syrups. And what the problem was that when WHO tested samples of the syrup, they found two contaminants called diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol in the products, which is why they have right now said it is potentially linked to the deaths. And they've alerted basically other countries to keep a track of their incoming medicines, and if they do have these medicines, to not consume it. And the name of these syrups are promethazine oral solution, cofmaxilin baby cough syrup, Macof baby cough syrup, and Magrip and cold syrup. These are the 4 syrups that are under the lens.
Now, you mentioned these 2 contaminants that were found in these syrups, diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. What kind of problems do these 2 things cause?
So yes, these ingredients are actually toxic for human beings and can attack the kidney. Of course, they'll lead to symptoms like vomiting and all that. But the most harmful is the acute kidney injury, and which can become fatal in young children. And this is not the first time. We have had cases in India before. 2020 in Jammu and Kashmir, 17 children died because, again, they had cough syrup where this diethylene glycol was found as a contaminant.
And what action has the Indian Drug Regulatory Authority taken so far?
So right now, WHO is investigating the case in Gambia. From the information that they've shared with the Indian authorities, we know that they've collected 23 samples of these 4 syrups. And out of those 23 samples, 4 samples contained these contaminants. But what the Indian authorities are saying that they still do not have any, documentation or any communication from the WHO establishing a causal link between the use of these medicines and the deaths that have occurred. So that they are waiting, but our apex drug regulator is also a part of the investigation now. And they have looked into the Haryana-based company, and they've said that this company is indeed making these medicines and they have sold it to Gambia. And they found that for now, they've sold it only to Gambia and no other country. So that's what we know from the Indian side.
And Anonna, we know that this is a developing story, but is there any advice that WHO has issued to countries about this issue so that such incidents don't happen again?
So what they have said to all the member countries is that, keep a track of your import network. See if you have these medicines. Ensure that nobody uses it. They've told people that, if you find yourself with these medicines, don't use it. Take it to your national regulator. Ask them to test it for the contaminants. And more importantly, I think the WHO has also told the authorities to monitor any sort of informal market where these medicines can be found, apart from whatever is the regular import mechanism. So that is what they've said in the alert.
And next, we talk about an incident of public flogging in Gujarat. Earlier this week, video clips went viral of a police officer dressed in plain clothes repeatedly beating a group of Muslim men with a giant stick. The men being beaten up were those who had been arrested for pelting stones at a garba event that took place in Gujarat's Kheda district. The videos have caused a lot of outrage and have drawn criticism from some opposition leaders in the state. To talk about this incident, joining us is Indian Express's Aditi Raja, who reports on central Gujarat for the paper. So, Aditi, to start with, could you describe what one can see in these video clips that have now gone viral?
This video emerged on Tuesday, in which you can see policemen from the local crime branch of Kheda district rounding up accused who were named in the FIR of Monday's riot. The video shows plainclothes men allegedly beating up the accused named in the FIR. They have been pinned to the electricity pole, and you can see one officer who has holstered a gun around him beating these men with a baton. Another officer is seen removing their wallets and mobile phones from their pocket before they were beaten. There are a couple of other officers who are holding them pinned to the electricity pole through one of the spaces in the pillar. And you can see the others are ushering the other accused in the waiting and then sending them off to the police van.
And so, where exactly did this incident, this public flogging, take place?
So, this incident has occurred in Unthela village of Matar Taluka in Kheda district. The incident occurred on Monday night, which was the night of Ashtami of Navratri. The Sarpanch of the village, Indravadan Patel, had a vow when he won the Panchayat polls in December 2021 that he would perform this Ashtami Puja at the Tulja Bhavani temple in the village and organize one night's garba as part of the Ashtami Puja. So this was one night's garba being organized at the Tulja Bhavani temple on Monday to mark Ashtami. And according to the police, the garba was almost coming to an end and to be followed by an arati when the stone pelting began. According to police officials, before the stone pelting happened, members of the minority community apparently came up and told the garba players to stop playing the garba and stop playing the DJ music. And thereafter, immediately there were stones flying, and 7 or 8 of the players and people who had organized the garba were injured. Some have suffered fractures. 2 of them are with serious injuries. And one of the 2 policemen who were also assaulted in the riot has sustained critical injuries on his private parts because he was allegedly beaten up very badly.
Okay, so this stone pelting, this riot happens, but when does the public flogging take place?
So this video emerged on Tuesday, a day after the riot took place on Monday night and after the FIR was filed, in which 43 persons have been identified and an additional mob of 150 has been booked for attempt to murder, rioting, among other sections. This video emerged sometime on Tuesday afternoon when the police was rounding up the accused based on the FIR filed on Monday night at Matar police station.
And Aditi, can you talk about who are these policemen who are doing the public flogging in these videos, who are beating up the accused?
So the officers you see in the video are from the Kheda district's local crime branch, which is called the LCB. The man you see in plainclothes flogging the accused is PI Ashok Parmar. He heads the LCB, local crime branch of Kheda district. There is another officer who is seen pulling out mobile phones and wallets from the pockets of the accused before they are beaten up by Parmar. He is PSI DD Kumawat, Police Sub-Inspector DD Kumawat. And then there are other subordinate officers from the LCB team who are seen holding the accused pinned to the electricity pole at the chalk. There are other officers who are, sending the men one by one to the electricity pole. And after they are flogged, you can see one constable in the uniform ushering them into the Kheda police van. So top officials have confirmed that their action against the accused is under probe. In fact, DGP Gujarat Ashish Bhatia also confirmed that they are probing into the action of the police officers involved in this video.
And now that this video has gone viral, how has the opposition in the state and people in general reacted to this incident?
The video obviously has sparked a lot of outrage, especially from the minority MLAs of the opposition. Imran Khedawala, Gayasuddin Sheikh have written letters to the DGP Gujarat Police seeking action against the officers. But on the other hand, the villagers of Undela are jubilant about it. So when we visited Undela on Thursday, the villagers said that they were not happy because the police had beaten up some men, but they were happy because it was justice finally. They claim that every time there is a event that they have to hold at the chalk, there is a contention, there are stones flying, there are minor clashes. Although this was the biggest clash that the village has seen in a long time, and perhaps the first FIR in a very, very long time. So therefore, for them, the police flogging the men before taking them away was, more a vindication of what they call has been their trauma from the intimidation they have been receiving. As you can even see in the video, the villagers were cheering, they were chanting Bharat Mata Ki Jai, they were egging on, the police officers to punish them, and the police was making the accused say sorry to the crowd. Some of the villagers also believe that the police action actually happened because one of the GRD Jawans who was attacked during the riot is critically injured, and it was also anger because two officers on duty were attacked, one of whom is critical.
And do we know whether any action is going to be taken against these officers?
So an inquiry has been set up on Thursday, and DYSP of Kapadwanj Taluka of Kheda district, VN Solanki, has been handed over the inquiry. So VN Solanki confirmed to the Indian Express that he has indeed received orders on Thursday to inquire into the matter. DGP Gujarat, of course, has confirmed to the Indian Express that they are inquiring into the incident. For about 2 days, the police in Kheda was telling us that they are looking into the authenticity of the video, but it appears that now the video has been verified and further action is being initiated. Top officials have even told us that PI Parmar and the other officers who are seen in the video might even face some kind of preliminary disciplinary action while the inquiry is happening. And of course, they will be served show cause notices and be asked to explain why did they resort to this kind of action before the accused were even produced in court.
And there have been instances where this has happened in the past, where clashes have taken place during Garba events in the state. So talk about these clashes and the tensions that we have seen lately between Hindus and Muslims in Gujarat.
So Garba celebrations in Gujarat are a sensitive subject. It has turned sensitive, especially over the last few years when commercial Garba organizers in cities like Vadodara, Surat perhaps, started issuing RFID cards to participants who were pre-registered. This was when there was a lot of noise around love jihad and how people belonging to other religions, especially Muslims, would enter Garba grounds and start playing Garba. So there is a lot of polarization that has anyway happened around the festivals. Now you don't really see Muslims participating in Garbas in Gujarat. And what also happens is that even in general, whether it is Garba or whether it is Ganesh Chaturthi, there are miscreants. We don't know whether it is exactly done by one particular community or not. But the police say that they are antisocial elements, miscreants, pelting stones, inciting violence. So stone pelting and rioting during festivals does happen very regularly. Even in the recent past, there has been an incident in Savli Taluka, Vadodara district. There has been an incident in Surat. So the polarization is there, and I think when you go onto the ground, like in the case of Undela village, you will always find people telling you stories about how this has been happening forever, and it has reached a point where no community can tolerate it anymore. So from the history that many of these mixed neighborhoods have, there is a lot of pent up frustration, so minor things trigger clashes. For example, traffic collisions, the motorcycle just brushing past somebody's leg, and then if you realize that they belong to another community, it results in a riot. It has happened in Vadodara city. So triggers are as small as, just spark, but it's enough to, bring mobs onto the road.
And so, considering this, are there things that the police is doing in such neighborhoods to calm the tensions?
So the police was telling us how it has started holding a lot more peace committee meetings with leaders from both communities, especially stressing on the point of social media, which has become one of the most important tools of communication and also one of the most misused tools. The DYSP of Nadia today was telling us that each police station in Khera district has also formed WhatsApp groups with sarpanches of villages to specifically communicate with them to try to resolve tensions before they flare up. The WhatsApp messages from the police constantly stressing on the fact that fake news from WhatsApp should be ignored, social media should not be used to incite violence or instigate mobs. So there has been a history, and with the tools available right now, it's very easy for these communal tensions to flare up.
And next, we talk about the prestigious Nobel Prize. Since the beginning of this week, the Nobel Committee has been awarding the prizes for this year. So far, it has announced the winners in the field of physics, medicine, chemistry, and literature. And today, it will finally hand out the Peace Prize as well. In the coming days, we'll be talking about some of these winners on the podcast. And today, we start with the 3 scientists who received the Nobel Prize in Physics. And the thing to note is that the experiment that they won this prize for was considered impossible until some years ago. In fact, the phenomena they proved was famously considered spooky by Einstein. And for good reason, because it goes against everything we know about everyday life. Things that are described by classical physics or Newtonian physics.
Things that almost everyone understands.
That's Amitabh Sinha, who reports on science and environment for the paper. And we'll be talking to him about the winners this time.
Newton's laws of motion, action, reaction, no force producing some acceleration and those kind of things. So that is classical physics, and it holds very good in our everyday experiences. Almost everything gets wonderfully described by Newtonian physics.
But he says that at the beginning of the 20th century, when scientists were discovering that atoms are actually made up of electrons and protons and other subatomic building blocks, they found out that these new particles behaved in a very different way.
So what scientists realized is that somehow their behavior, the way they move around, the way that they exist, their behavior is not consistent with our Newtonian physics, with classical physics. And that was the strange part, because what scientists realize is that some of these particles, they get created and get destroyed, they get merged into each other, they get created from the same place. So all sorts of weird things happen. But even more weirder was the fact that some of these particles, they were seen to exist at multiple places at the same time. That's not what you expect of anything in your everyday experience.
This phenomena is called superimposition and is now part of what is called quantum theory, a part of physics that studies the nature of things at the subatomic level. And superimposition is actually just one of the weird things that occurs at this level. The other thing that is known to happen is that subatomic particles seem to change their behavior and characteristics when they are being observed.
Now, that again is very weird. So if Shashank, you are alone in your room, you behave in a certain manner. But if you realize that somebody is watching you, then suddenly your act changes, behavior changes. And that is what is happening. But you are a conscious person. We are talking about matter. We are talking about small particles. But this comparison is very much valid. They react when they realize that they are being observed.
Now, besides superimposition and these tiny particles changing when they are being observed, the other really strange phenomena of quantum theory is entanglement, which is perhaps the weirdest of all. And even though it's very technical, we asked Amitabh to explain it to us in everyday language. So just a heads up, a bit of accuracy is lost here, but it should give you an overall sense of what it involves.
So in entanglement, what scientists saw is when two quantum particles that have interacted with each other in past, then in certain scenarios, in certain cases, what happens is they seem to get entangled in such a way that even when they are separated, and by separated, I mean separated by even very great distances. So theoretically, they can be separated at two ends of this universe. So when they are separated, they remain entangled in such a way that if one changes the behavior, the other one reacts to it almost instantaneously, regardless of the distance between the two. And there is nothing connecting the two. There is no medium, it's complete vacuum. There is no wire going anywhere. But if one of them acts in a particular manner, the other one is known to react almost instantaneously.
And this is what Einstein found spooky. In fact, he called this phenomena the spooky action at a distance. And he was not alone. When entanglement was discovered in the 1920s, it made a lot of people very uncomfortable, because it goes against what we think of as common sense. Now, Einstein argued that there was something missing in this puzzle, something that we don't fully understand about quantum theory yet. And that's what the whole debate was about for a while. And Amitabh says the problem was that entanglement was very difficult to prove through an experiment.
The problem is that you cannot observe the process. You can only observe the result. Because as I said, the mere act of observation, it changes everything. You disrupt the system itself. So there was a problem in experimenting.
And this problem continued until a relatively young Irish researcher called John Bell appeared on the scene. Amitabh says that he is someone who had a major influence on 20th century physics.
So Bell worked out a mathematical foundation. So he was telling scientists that, look, you do not actually have to see the process. And he prepared a mathematical framework saying, and it's called Bell's inequality. So it's the opposite of equation. So there is no equal sign. You have an unequal sign there. So those are Bell's inequality. What he proved mathematically is that you don't have to actually see the process correspond to this mathematical, inequality that I'm proposing. If your final results violate this inequality, then entanglement is proved. It's already shown. And if the inequality is preserved, then probably Einstein was right. So he produced a mathematical test, and that test comes out in the result, not in the process. So he was the one who proposed this.
But even after Bell worked out this mathematical foundation, to carry out an actual experiment to prove entanglement was still very hard and was considered impossible at one point. And this is what the three scientists who won the Nobel Prize for Physics this time managed to do. They managed to conduct experiments that proved entanglement. Now, the first one out of the three to do this was the US physicist John Clauser.
And he showed that Bell's inequality in his experiment actually got violated. And he said, look, Bell's inequality is violated, and therefore this particular thing, entanglement, is real. It's not being caused by something that we do not know as yet. That's what the counter argument was, that this is happening because of something about which we do not know. And these guys showed that, look, very clearly, Bell's inequality is getting violated here, and therefore it is real. There are no hidden variables, no hidden properties.
But even after Clauser conducted this experiment, people had their doubts and criticisms. But then after some time, the French physicist Alain Aspect conducted another experiment and put all those doubts to rest. And he is the second scientist who won the prize this time.
So his was the first experiment which did not have so-called loopholes that could be pointed at. And even his experiment showed that in that case, Bell's inequality was again violated. Now, the third person who has shared the prize, which is Anton Zeilinger, he not just did these experiments, he went a step further and even showed that this particular entanglement property, weird as though it may be, and we still do not have a very good explanation of why this happens, and people are seem to be found peace with it. But he suggested, he showed experimentally that this property can actually be exploited. It can be harnessed to make technological progress in areas that earlier were supposed to be too big a challenge.
And one of the things that Zellinger showed is that by exploiting this phenomena of entanglement, teleportation was possible.
Now, again, we have to be a little careful. Usual thing about teleportation is that comes from science fiction is actually a person gets transported from one place to another without any medium. That is the usual meaning of teleportation that we usually understand. Here, what he showed was not that kind of phenomenon. So there was no movement of matter from one place to another. But what he did show is that the quantum state, that the state, or let's say the properties of one particular particle, those properties got transferred to another particle located somewhere else, and the initial particle, it lost those properties. So only the properties moved from one place to another without there being any connection, and it moved from one particle to the other. So in a way, the concept of teleportation was demonstrated by Zellinger.
And besides this, he says that the technology is also being used to create secure communication channels that would be immune to hacking and would be able to send information in a much faster way.
So scientists have begun to play around with it, realizing that it's a fact of nature, and they have begun to exploit it, harness it for much more useful purposes.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.